Joel, it's great to have a chance to speak to you at least like this because I'm going to explain something. You and I have done interviews for years. Okay. When I was with 680 News, we used to do it over the phone.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And we've never had the chance to do this. And
We
I
have not.
remember I was at the Junos and my girlfriend and I were in Halifax and we met up with some of her friends who said that they were massive fans of yours. And of course, I said, well, I've interviewed him several times, but that was before. So they were looking for the interviews. They couldn't find him because I've got him on, I'll tell you how long ago, mini disc. All right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay.
And
There we go.
so now I've got the proof to say, yes, I've interviewed you. And the coolest part is you're here in Toronto because later on I'm going to get a chance to finally meet you one on one because we're having a special listening party to this new album that we're going to talk about over at Warner Music Canada.
Yeah.
How does it
Yeah.
feel being here in Toronto? And finally, we get to meet.
Yeah. No, it's great. I'm happy to be up here. I'm excited that the new record's on its way. Looking forward to that performance. And I'm hitting the road like on Tuesday. So I got a lot in front of me. So I'm excited about all of it. I'm also a little bit like, okay, here comes the work, which is great actually. But so I'm just kind of like pacing myself because I see like there's 36 or 38 shows on the upcoming tour.
Wow.
So I'll be on pretty much on the road till November 30th. So it's a
Amazing.
good run in Canada. It's gonna be
Look,
good.
before we get into the actual name of the album and everything else too, I'm just curious, how have things been with you for the last couple of years, especially going into COVID, coming out of COVID? How much did all of that, and it's funny, I'm still talking about it even today, because
Yep.
I found with musicians like yourself,
Yep.
COVID really did change the way the textures of music, the
Yep.
storylines, and things like that. And personally, to me, I feel like the album that I listened to, I
hmm
feel like there's a touch of that still there.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I some of the songs were certainly written during that time. There's a tune called Let Me Go, Joe, which is like written in September 2020 when, my last album, 44, came out when the world shut down, like April 20th or whatever it was, 2020. And so I was supposed to be on the road all through the spring. That didn't happen. I mean, I ended up the tour was delayed 2.5, 3 years,
Mhm.
But so Let Me Go, Joe was a song about like, okay, like let me get out on the road. Let me go make my mistakes, the pedal to the metal, just to know that them's the breaks. Um, and it was about that kind of I mean, I've been a touring musician since I was 19.
Yeah.
And COVID, my joke in the shows was like, for 30 years, my wife Rebecca's put up with a touring musician, but when COVID hit, she put up with a musician who wasn't on the road. Which is like, I don't know, you'd have to ask her which works better. But yeah, yeah, I mean, there's some quiet stuff on the record. It's a quiet record.
Yeah.
But spent a lot of time reading, thinking, observing, and so that sort of so yeah, I mean, I'm lucky to have to be out gigging. A lot of musicians that I know who maybe didn't quite have the profile that I had, or even had, but a lot of people just packed it in, or they just went, okay, I got to move on to something else right now, and they're not quite back to the same. So I feel lucky to be able to go out on a tour and do what I'm doing because it's definitely like it hit the music business, it hit the arts, it hit everything hard, right? Changed the world. And so, but I think some people just were like, okay, I got to move on to something else because there's no wiggle room. I was fortunate to have a studio where I could do work in Dartmouth, all those things, which made a difference as far as kind of staying in the game.
How do you reflect on your career? Because um, you have hardcore fans
hmm
for decades. And it's not even like it's about charting top 40. It's none of that kind of stuff. It
Yeah.
really is you're one of the few artists who create music that is from you that you enjoy. You put it out there. And like I said, hardcore fans don't leave. Once they hear it, they love it and they stay with you, which helps you to be able to make albums, to
Yeah.
tour. but it has nothing to do with top 40 or Spotify or this or that. It really is what the fans hear and what they enjoy.
Well, I feel really fortunate. It's nice to hear you say that, and I do feel like people have stuck with me and continue to come out and support what I do. Um, Part of it is, I mean, I had a lot of opportunity when I was young, when I was in thrush hermit. We were in the right place at the right time in Halifax. I like to think we were talented. We had some get up and go, and a bunch of tunes. So we kind of we signed an American publishing deal. Then we signed an American record deal. We toured the States, did all this. Our career really built in Canada, didn't really build in the States. When by the time that band broke up and I went solo, there was an audience that I could kind of inherit some of, people who stuck with me from the Hermit days, built on that with the emergency and all of it. Um, the other thing is but I never. I think there was a perception that maybe I sold more records than I did. Like I would never, I've never been a big record selling. Sell stuff from the stage, all that. But yeah, never chart. I mean, the biggest tune of mine, "Nowhere with You," in the shows is partly because Zeller's added it to that ad in the 2000s. So a few opportunities here and there that were great, as well as amazing live opportunities. Like the Hip invited us on that national tour across Canada, took us through the States as well. We opened for Paul McCartney in Halifax, had a number of like big shows, opening spots that have kind of helped build the audience. And I play a lot solo and then do band shows. So I kind of try to take gigs wherever they are. And so as a result, my audience kind of comes from the varying places they've seen me. And I've kind of got a mixed audience of different ages. That kind of helps too. So, because it's not just sort of one narrow demographic of people. And then lastly, my wife, Rebecca, who did the art for the new record and has done the art for a bunch of my records. She's very much like an artist who when you talk about when she makes stuff, she's never thinking about money. In fact, if that comes up, it kind of wrecks it for her. She's really loves to make art because she needs to make art. I'm kind of wired the same way, but I do the dance with the music business and all that a little bit more. But her as kind of like a guiding principle of like what matters is there to kind of remind me that it's like I'm just going to follow my intuition here, do what matters, and I have a great manager, Sherry, and people in my corner agent, all of whom help me figure out how we're going to sell it. But that doesn't really figure into the making of it. And I think that's also allowed me to have an audience that kind of follows me artistically, without the hard sell.
Well, we kind of talked a little bit about it a couple of minutes ago. Let's get to it because I always like to make it official. What is the name of the new album and how does it reflect you in this point in your career?
Yeah, so the album is called One Real Reveal, and it's a quiet record. I made it on a 4-track cassette machine with one mic. And so it's very, very minimal. Like it's only 4 overdubs. I'd sing the song with a guitar and then I'd add harmonies and play another instrument and layer it together. So it's very sparse. And it's contemplative. I thought of it as a nighttime record at one point, and then my wife Rebecca was like, "No, it's an early morning before the sun comes up record." And I really do like that as a way to describe it because it's not a dark record. There's it's not overly melancholy. If anything, I think it's hopeful and I think it's romantic. And so it does kind of work in the darkness with the light on the horizon. And so yeah, I mean that would be a way to describe it. And it's a slow burn. I don't know that it's not. It's like it doesn't come out swinging.
No.
And there's some spoken word on it as well, some poetry and some spoken word. So it goes to places I've not gone before, which I'm quite happy about. And I feel like it's a departure, but those who know my writing, there's certainly hallmarks of what I do in there, I think so.
I feel like this is and I want to use this term correctly, it's a runaway album. When I say that, when you look at the world today, for example, as we speak, the US is going to have their big debate going on.
Hmm.
We've seen, protests going on in schools and things like that. We've had so many bad things going on in the world. I feel
Hmm.
like this is the safe place to come to, put it on, and for at least for the duration of listening to this album from beginning to end, we can close all that stuff up
Hmm.
and just come back and just go. That's how I feel about this album. That's why I say it's a
That's
runaway.
No, that means a lot to hear that. Yeah, I mean, it's not a political record, it's a
No.
romantic one, and it's an interior kind of dive, there's a lot of inner space on it. That being said, there is some writing around the tension of opposites, and the right amount of tension in a relationship, or even in your relationship with the world, is necessary, right? Like you don't, if we always live in tension. Right now we're living in extreme tension.
Yes.
And I mean, so if anything, you want to slacken it a little bit,
Mm.
because there's such polarity right now in terms of people's opinions and all of the things going on in the world. This is this record doesn't address any of that directly, but it is there, and it's partly in that. But I think of the right amount of tension as a romantic sort of, or as sort of like a playful place in which you're sort of, that you exist in relation, but if you strain that relationship too much, it breaks and falls apart, and you're alone, you know. And so, if anything, you're kind of trying to temper yourself in relation to the world and in relation to other people. So, yeah, I don't know. I also find like everything right now is so explicit, like everything's so intense and explicit, and stated, and almost has no metaphor, no way for you to find yourself in it in relation to it. You're like, this is what it is. It's like, well, I want something that I don't quite understand. I want there to be a little more poetry, or a little more, so I can find myself in it. So I wanted to make a record that wasn't as explicit in that regard. Um, just as counterpoint. I also find a lot of music being made on computers and things, and there's some great songs that get made that way, lots of stuff. But by kind of working in the analog realm, and not sanding off all the rough edges, I feel like it maybe is a little different than what you're hearing, because so many things are quite heavily formatted and artificial to some degree, that everything sounds so good. That's kind of the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? Everything sounds so professional, you know? And I wanted something that kind of maybe moved a little bit in another direction. So.
It's almost like you did a throwback back to the 70s. I mean, four track, you got the guitar going, the voice. I was thinking of and I can't think of his name, who sang Bad Bad Leroy Brown.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um
Is that Jim Croce?
Jim Croce, thank you.
Yeah, yeah, he's
That to
cool.
me is what this album is a throwback to his style of music.
Wow, that's cool. That's really cool. Yeah, I mean, there's something about the 4-track cassette. It's like it's got a waver to it that digital recording or even more modern tape machines don't have, because they're so locked. But the 4-track cassette always has that little bit of shimmy. So when you listen to it, you feel like you're listening to one of your cassettes, right? You're listening
Yeah.
to music on a cassette machine, which the pitch is ain't quite perfect. It's just moving side to side. So it kind of has this nostalgia of sound, as much as songwriting style. So it brings a sound into the world, that has just this slight waver to it, which feels older and feels kind of romantic to me, because a lot of my musical experiences were on shaky turntables, on cassette machines that sometimes chewed the tape up, that
Yeah.
kind of,
Yeah,
yeah.
kids today will never know the horrors of putting that pencil into the cassette and
Yeah,
trying to roll that back, or even
glorious.
being able to edit that
That's right.
broken part of the tape. But
That's
anyways,
right.
I'm curious though. When you were recording this, did you play instrument first and then vocals? Did you do it at
No,
the same time?
always the same time. So
Wow.
I'd sing the song with a guitar, and then I would add, say, a mandolin or a banjo or a tenor guitar, and I'd sing the harmony while everything was in one mic. So I'd find the blend between the instrument and the vocal, and then I would do the same with the overdubs. And so it's essentially like four instruments and four voices. A couple of places where that wasn't the case, but by and large, it's sort of two things in the middle, and then two instruments just panned at about 2 and 10 o'clock. So it's got this little slight stereo spread. And I kind of stuck with that as almost the template for the whole record, because I like the singularity of it. I like that limitation too, because I mean, I've got a great hi-fi recording studio that I've made records on. So I
Mhm.
had kind of like, I could have kind of gone to town, which I did on my last record with production, but this one felt like kind of, there was something about just reining it in, and making it on that machine that sort of felt I don't know, just where I was at. I like the sound of it. There's something to it. The first song I recorded for was a song called High Summer. And when I finished that, I was like, I really like the sound of this. So I used that as sort of the map for the rest of the record.
Just curious too. Did anything surprise you after recordings were done and you listened back and didn't realize, damn, this worked, and I didn't think it was going to work the way it did?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's always the thing, like part of it was what you're saying, where did I overdub? A lot of the time I would overdub an instrument, then sing a vocal. But when
Right.
you start to do stuff live, you're like, I don't know if this is good enough. Or I would, and there'd be even a shaky performance, and I'd start overdubbing even on something that I thought was a little shaky on its own. And once I added those other layers, the imperfections sort of started to sort of like disappear, or if not disappear, kind of get covered with other imperfections that meant
Mhm.
that you were never like hyper focused on one shaky moment. And so that general waver that starts to happen where you're playing a bunch of live takes with an instrument and singing at the same time makes for this like blurry kind of journey that I don't know, it just
Mhm.
it felt right to me. That weird thing where you go, wait, no, this does work despite the fact that I can hear things that don't I would have nitpicked in other more clinical settings, if that makes sense. You almost start to
Yeah.
let go. So you get surprised by the fact that the imperfections actually become part of the joy of it. Become part of the sort of like the patina. You know what I mean? Like of the wood floor that you're like hammering on or whatever. You know.
So what's going to happen tour wise? Where are we hitting spots?
I start in Nanaimo on the 17th, and we do a Western 16 shows all the way to Winnipeg from Nanaimo because I've got multiple nights in Calgary and Edmonton and Vancouver. And then a little break, and then an East Coast leg, and then an Ontario leg. And it ends up being about 36, 37 shows when the dust settles on November 30th, the last show. So yeah, you can check. A lot of them are sold out, but there's still lots of tickets here and there as well. So it'd be great, spread the word and people coming out.
Well, I'm lucky enough that I get to see you in a very intimate crowd later on today.
Look forward
Get to
to it.
hear some of the songs live. And finally, after I don't know how many, I could say decades, probably two, I
Yeah.
get to get a picture with you together one on one, and I'm posting the hell out of it.
Hey,
So
crazy.
cannot wait. Thank you so much for the interview. Looking forward to later on today. And if anything, thank you for representing Canadian music the way you do, because I understand why the hardcore fans love you, man.
Hey, Rudy,
It
thank you.
really is it really is a blessing to have your music part of the Canadian culture.
It means a lot. Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you.